Jasmine confronts Trump for openly mocking knowledge and a law degree on live TV with America's credibility at stake. In just 3 minutes, laughter turns to shock as documents, clips, and dates collide. Trump's contempt sounds loud, dismissive, and raw until the room falls silent. If an empire learns to sneer at knowledge, what kind of future can it possibly build? Hold tight, what you're about to see could rewrite history before your eyes. The cameras are already rolling when Jasmine speaks. No introduction, no preamble. Mr. Trump, you have spent years publicly mocking education, dismissing expertise, and turning leadership competence into a punchline. You've built a political brand on contempt for knowledge itself. Today we're going to examine what that contempt has cost this country. Trump sits across from her, leaning back with that familiar half smile. He looks amused, like someone invited to a game he knows he'll win. The studio audience goes completely still. 5 seconds pass. Nobody moves. The tension is palpable. Trump's smile widens. He shakes his head slowly, playing to the cameras. Here we go again. Another intellectual with fancy degrees telling America that book learning is what matters. Those pieces of paper from universities make someone qualified to lead. He leans forward, voice dripping with mockery. You know what I call that elite nonsense? The kind of talk that builds nothing, fixes nothing, helps nobody except people in ivory towers looking down on regular Americans who actually work. The audience fractures instantly, some nodding along, others shifting uncomfortably. Trump waves dismissively at Jasmine. Education, expertise, these are just fancy words for people who can't do anything practical, so they hide behind credentials. Jasmine lets Trump's words hang in the air. When she finally speaks, her voice is quiet. So quiet, people have to lean forward. Being loud doesn't make you right, Mr. Trump. Mocking knowledge doesn't make you wise, it just makes you dangerous. The camera zooms in on her face. No anger, just calm certainty. Throughout this hearing, we're going to examine what happens when a leader treats expertise as an enemy. And at the end, America gets to decide, is leadership about volume, or is it about understanding? Trump doesn't wait. He just starts talking, voice rising, to fill the studio. You want to talk about knowledge? I built an empire, actual buildings, jobs, while people like you sat in classrooms learning theories. I've created thousands of jobs, negotiated billion-dollar deals, run companies, all without needing professors to tell me how. Jasmine tries to respond, but Trump talks over her. That's real knowledge, practical expertise, not whatever law school taught you about constitutional theory. The audience responds, some with cheers, others with silence. Trump feeds off the energy. Jasmine sits perfectly still, not writing frantically, not shuffling papers, just listening, watching, letting Trump fill the space. Her hand rests on a closed folder. Occasionally she touches its edge, reminding herself it's there. Trump continues. Education has become a scam. Universities charge hundreds of thousands to teach useless things, giving meaningless degrees. Jasmine's silence is having an effect. People wonder why she's not fighting back. She opens the folder slowly. Don't look at it. Just opens it, its contents hidden but present. Trump notices. His rhythm falters briefly. That's the problem with intellectuals. They need folders and documents because they can't win on substance. The moderator tries to intervene. Mr. Trump, if we could return... Trump doesn't look at him. We are talking about it. The allegation is, I don't respect education. You're right, I don't. Not the kind that produces people who recite theories, but can't solve problems. Ms. Jasmine, would you like to respond? Jasmine shakes her head. Not yet. Let him continue. Trump grins, reading her restraint as weakness. See, even she knows I'm right. But something in Jasmine's expression, patient certainty, suggests Trump is misreading the situation. She glances at the folder, then at Trump. The smallest hint of pity crosses her face. Trump is still talking, still winning, or so he, the Jasmine, speaks, her voice cutting through cleanly. Mr. Trump, I'd like to show the audience something. A clip from an interview you gave years ago. Publicly available footage. Just your own words. The monitors flicker to life. The clip begins. Trump younger with a news anchor, answering a question about leadership. What he says shocks in its contrast. You need educated people around you. Experts who understand policy, who've studied governance history. law, economics. I surround myself with the smartest people with real credentials, because that's how you make good decisions. The studio goes silent. On-screen, Trump continues. Anyone who tells you education doesn't matter, that expertise isn't important, that person is either lying or stupid. Leadership requires knowledge. Real knowledge. The clip ends. Jasmine lets the silence stretch. Finally, let the record show that Donald Trump once stated that education and expertise are essential for leadership, that dismissing education is a sign of dishonesty or incompetence. She looks at Trump. Would you like to clarify why your position has changed? Trump's face flushes. That was taken out of context. It's not out of context. Jasmine interrupts calmly. We have the full interview. In no part of it do you express the contempt for education that you've made central to your current brand. The room changes. People who were nodding with Trump now sit back thoughtful. A woman whispers to her companion. A man pulls out his phone to fact-check. Trump tries to explain, but the energy has shifted. Jasmine makes a notation. She's building a record, point by point. She looks up. Being loud doesn't make you right. Contradicting your own statements doesn't make you credible. She pauses. If a leader's position on something as fundamental as knowledge can change based on what's politically convenient, what else might they be willing to change? The cameras hold on Trump's face. The smirk is gone. Being loud doesn't make you right, and dismissing evidence doesn't make it disappear. Trump is no longer winning. Jasmine opens a different folder. This one is thinner, more worn, as if it's been referenced many times before. Let's talk about what knowledge actually means in the context of governing a country. Not abstract philosophy, not academic theory for its own sake, but practical applied understanding that affects the lives of ordinary Americans every single day. She pulls out a single sheet of paper. This is a summary of federal housing regulations. The rules that determine whether a family can qualify for a mortgage, whether a contractor can build affordable housing, whether zoning laws protect communities or trap them in cycles of poverty. Her voice is calm, educational. These regulations didn't appear out of nowhere. They were written by people who studied economics, who understood urban planning, who analyzed decades of data about what happens when housing policy goes wrong. They were written by people with expertise, the kind of expertise that comes from education, from study, from knowledge. She sets the paper down and picks up another. This is a healthcare policy brief. It explains how insurance markets work, how risk pools function, how coverage mandates affect premiums and access to care. Understanding this requires knowledge of actuarial science, epidemiology, healthcare economics, subjects that take years of study to master. Trump is leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, looking bored, as if this is beneath him. Jasmine continues undeterred. And this, she holds up a third document, is a summary of environmental regulations governing water safety. The standards that determine whether the water coming out of your tap is safe to drink, whether the river your children swim in is contaminated, whether industrial waste is being disposed of properly. She looks directly at the camera, speaking to the audience rather than to Trump. Every one of these policies requires knowledge, real specific technical knowledge, the kind that comes from education and expertise, the kind that Mr. Trump has spent years mocking as elite nonsense and talk that builds nothing. She pauses, letting that sink in. But here's what I want America to understand. These policies do build something. They build safety. They build protection. They build the framework that allows ordinary people to live their lives without constantly wondering if the systems around them are going to fail or exploit them. Her voice takes on an edge. When you mock the people who create these policies, when you dismiss their education and expertise as worthless, you're not just attacking intellectuals in ivory towers. You're attacking the very foundations of informed governance. You're telling America that the knowledge protecting them doesn't matter. Trump sits forward suddenly, his patience clearly exhausted. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This right here. His voice is loud, aggressive. You sit there with your papers and your regulations and your policy briefs, and you think that's what matters. You think that's what America needs: more rules, more bureaucracy, more complicated systems created by people who've never built anything in their lives. He stands up, unable to contain his energy. The moderator starts to object, but Trump waves him off. No, I'm going to say this because someone needs to say it. Paperwork doesn't build America. Regulations don't create jobs. Policy briefs don't put food on tables or roofs over heads. He points at Jasmine's documents dismissively. You know what those papers represent? They represent barriers. They represent the government getting in the way of people who actually want to do things, build things, create things. Every regulation you just praised is another obstacle for a small business owner trying to survive, another cost for a developer trying to create housing, another restriction on innovation and growth. His voice rises with conviction. I've spent my entire career fighting through the nonsense that people like you create. Every project I've ever built, I've had to navigate mountains of regulations written by people who've never run a business, never met a payroll, never risked their own money on anything. And you're sitting here telling America that this is good, that this protects them. He laughs, but it's a harsh sound. What it protects is the jobs of bureaucrats and regulators and academic experts who need complicated systems to justify their existence. What it does is make everything more expensive, more difficult, more impossible for regular people to navigate without hiring lawyers and consultants, more people with fancy degrees and no practical skills. Trump walks toward Jasmine's table, gesturing at her documents. You want to talk about water safety? I've built buildings with plumbing systems that serve thousands of people every day. You want to talk about housing? I've created more housing units than most of your policy experts have even visited. You want to talk about healthcare? I've provided health insurance to thousands of employees, negotiated with providers, dealt with the real-world costs and challenges. He turns back to the audience. That's the difference between us. She has papers. I have results. She has theories. I have buildings. She has education. I have achievements. And America doesn't need more of her and less of me. It needs exactly the opposite. Jasmine waits for Trump to sit down before responding. When she speaks, her voice is quieter than his, but somehow it cuts deeper. Mr. Trump, you've just perfectly illustrated the fundamental difference in how we view knowledge. To you, it's branding. It's a credential that some people use to justify their positions or inflate their importance. It's a logo, something that looks impressive, but doesn't do anything practical. She picks up one of her documents again. But that's not what knowledge is. Knowledge is a tool, and like any tool, its value depends on how it's used and who it's used to protect. Her voice strengthens. Let me give you a specific example. In the 1970s, there was a city in Michigan where children were being exposed to lead in their drinking water. The people in power, people very much like you, Mr. Trump, people who built things and created jobs and dismissed experts as overeducated elitists, they said the water was fine. They said concerns about lead were overblown. They said the regulations requiring testing and treatment were just bureaucratic nonsense getting in the way of practical governance. She pauses. And then researchers, people with degrees in chemistry and public health and epidemiology, people with the kind of education you mock, they tested the water. They analyzed the data. They used their knowledge to prove that children were being poisoned. And eventually, because of their expertise, the water system was fixed. Jasmine looks directly at Trump. That's what knowledge does. It protects people who don't have power. It gives voice to problems that people in charge would rather ignore. It provides evidence that can't be dismissed with charisma or confidence or the claim that you've built a lot of buildings. She stands now, matching his earlier physicality. You say knowledge is just talk, but knowledge is what stops powerful people from cutting corners that hurt vulnerable people. Knowledge is what prevents the kind of catastrophic failures that destroy lives and communities. Knowledge is what ensures that when you build one of your buildings, it doesn't collapse. That when you install plumbing, it doesn't poison the people using it. Her voice takes on real passion now. You view knowledge as a competitor to action, as if understanding something and doing something are opposites. But they're not. Knowledge is what makes action effective instead of dangerous. Expertise is what turns ambition into achievement instead of disaster. She picks up all three of her documents, holding them up. These aren't obstacles to progress, Mr. Trump. They're the foundation that makes progress possible without sacrificing safety, without exploiting the vulnerable, without creating disasters that take decades to fix. The cameras capture both of them. Trump standing arms crossed, face set in contempt. Jasmine standing documents in hand, face set in determination. So yes, she says quietly, there is a fundamental difference between us. You see knowledge as a logo, something to mock something that threatens your authority, something to tear down. I see knowledge as a tool, something to use, something that protects the powerless, something worth defending. She sets the documents down carefully. And the question for America is, which vision do you want governing you? A leader who dismisses expertise because it might limit his power, or a leader who embraces expertise because it protects your rights? Trump's face is flushed now. The dismissive amusement is gone, replaced by something uglier and more raw. You want to make this personal? Let's make it personal. His voice is sharp cutting. You sit there with your law degree and your folders and your righteous tone, and you lecture me about protecting people. You've never protected anyone. You've never built anything that lasts. You've never created a single job or solved a single real problem. He points at her, his gesture aggressive. You're a lawyer. You know what that means. It means you make a living off other people's problems. You don't fix things, you argue about them. You don't create solutions, you create complications. You don't help people, you help yourself to fees for making everything more difficult than it needs to be. The audience is uncomfortable now. This isn't political theater anymore. This is personal venom. Trump continues, his voice rising. And you have the audacity to stand there and tell America that your education makes you qualified to judge me. Your degree makes you competent to question my achievements. Your book learning gives you the right to lecture me about protecting people. He laughs, but it's cruel. I've forgotten more about real-world leadership than you'll ever learn in all your years of school. I've made decisions that affected thousands of people while you were still figuring out how to pass the bar exam. I've navigated crises, managed organizations, dealt with actual consequences for my choices, while you've been doing what reading cases, writing briefs, sitting in meetings, talking about hypothetical scenarios. His contempt is palpable now. You're not an investigator. You're not a protector of the public good. You're a professional nitpicker with fancy credentials who's built a career on tearing down people more successful than you'll ever be. You're exactly the kind of person who makes America weaker, someone who contributes nothing but acts superior because of degrees and connections and the approval of other useless intellectuals. Trump walks closer to her table. And the worst part, you actually believe your own propaganda. You actually think that having studied something makes you better than someone who's done something. You think knowledge from books is more valuable than wisdom from experience? You think your education gives you moral authority? He shakes his head with disgust. It doesn't. It just makes you dangerous. Because people like you, people with just enough education to sound credible, but not enough real-world experience to understand consequences, you're the ones who create the policies that sound good in theory, but destroy lives in practice. You're the ones who regulate industries you've never worked in, judge decisions you've never had to make, criticize achievements you could never match. Jasmine doesn't respond to the personal attacks. She simply opens another folder and pulls out a timeline, simple, clear dated entries arranged chronologically. Mr. Trump, you just spent several minutes attacking my credentials, my profession, and my competence. You characterize lawyers and educated professionals as parasites who contribute nothing and understand nothing. So I'd like to show you something. She places the timeline where the cameras can see it clearly. These are documented instances where you hired lawyers, consultants, and credentialed experts to handle critical aspects of your business operations, not once or twice, repeatedly, consistently, throughout your entire career. Her finger traces down the page. Here, a real estate transaction where you hired a team of lawyers with advanced degrees to structure the deal and navigate regulatory requirements. Here, a bankruptcy filing where you relied on financial experts and legal specialists to protect your assets. Here, a licensing agreement where you needed intellectual property attorneys to draft and enforce the contracts. She looks up at him. Here, a construction project where you hired engineers with advanced degrees to ensure structural integrity and building code compliance. Here, a hotel development where you needed architects and urban planners to design the property. Here, a branding initiative where you hired marketing consultants with business degrees to position your products. Her voice is steady, factual. Every single one of these professionals had the kind of education you're now mocking. Every single one brought the kind of expertise you're now dismissing as worthless. Every single one represented the type of knowledge-based contribution you're now characterizing as parasitic and useless. She picks up another document. And here's what's most revealing: in multiple interviews and public statements. From that period, you praised these professionals. You emphasized how important it was to work with the best educated people, the most credentialed experts, the top specialists in their fields. The timeline is still visible on the screen. Trump is staring at it, his jaw tight. Jasmine continues. So which is true, Mr. Trump? Is expertise valuable when you need it for your own projects, but worthless when it's used to analyze your leadership? Are credentials important when they benefit you, but meaningless when they qualify someone to question you? Is education essential for the people you hire, but contemptible for the people who challenge you? She pauses, and the silence is heavy. Or is the truth simpler than that? Is the truth that you respect knowledge when it serves your interests and attack it when it threatens your power? That you value expertise when it makes you money but mock it when it holds you accountable? The shift in the room is unmistakable now. People who were nodding along with Trump's personal attacks are now looking uncomfortable, uncertain. The timeline on the screen is too clear, too documented, too impossible to dismiss. A man in the fourth row who was cheering earlier is now sitting with his arms crossed, face thoughtful. A woman near the front who was smiling at Trump's mockery is now frowning at the timeline, following the entries with her eyes. Trump starts to respond, but his voice lacks its earlier confidence. Those situations were different. When you're running a business, you need specialists for specific tasks. That doesn't mean, it means exactly what I said it means. Jasmine interrupts, her voice firm, but not loud. It means you understand perfectly well that expertise matters, that education serves a purpose, that knowledge is essential for making sound decisions. You just don't want to admit it publicly because your political brand depends on pretending otherwise. She picks up the timeline and holds it up to the camera. This isn't about attacking your business practices. This is about exposing the hypocrisy of mocking education in public while depending on it in private. This is about revealing that your contempt for expertise isn't a principle. It's a performance designed to appeal to people you think are too unsophisticated to notice the contradiction. A voice from the audience, spontaneous, unplanned, calls out, "Why did you hire all those experts if education doesn't matter?" The moderator starts to intervene, but Jasmine raises her hand. Let him answer. It's a fair question. Trump looks at the audience member, then at the timeline, then back at Jasmine. You can see him calculating, searching for the angle that will let him escape this trap. Business is different from government, he finally says. In business, you can afford to have specialists handle narrow technical issues. In government, you need leaders who understand the big picture, who can make decisions without getting lost in details. Jasmine's response is immediate. So knowledge is useful for details, but not for big decisions. Expertise matters for technical issues, but not for policy. Education is valuable for executing your plans, but worthless for evaluating whether those plans are sound. She shakes her head slowly. That's not leadership philosophy, Mr. Trump. That's just another way of saying you want to surround yourself with informed people while remaining uninformed yourself. That you want the benefits of expertise without the accountability that comes from actually understanding what you're deciding. Sakunun. The question hangs in the air, unanswered and unanswerable. If knowledge matters enough that you relied on it for every major decision in your business career, why doesn't it matter when Americans try to evaluate whether your government decisions are sound? The cameras hold on Trump's face. The arrogance is still there, but it's cracking around the edges, and everyone can see it. Trump is still talking, filling the space with words, trying to regain control of the narrative that's slipping away from him. But something has changed in Jasmine's approach. She's no longer responding immediately. She's no longer engaging with each attack. She simply sits there, listening, watching, her pen poised over her notepad, but not moving. Her eyes fixed on Trump's face with an expression that's impossible to read, not hostile, not sympathetic, just observational, as if she's studying a specimen under glass. The silence from her side of the table is becoming noticeable, uncomfortable. Trump keeps glancing at her between statements, waiting for the pushback that isn't coming, the defense that never arrives. You see, this is what they do, Trump says, gesturing toward Jasmine while addressing the audience. They sit there with their quiet superiority, their academic smugness, acting like silence. Makes them wise when really it just means they don't have answers. They don't have comebacks. They don't have anything except this performance of being above it all. Jasmine doesn't respond. She simply makes a small notation on her pad. The scratch of pen on paper is audible in the tense quiet. Trump's voice gets louder as if volume can fill the void her silence is creating. I've dealt with people like this my entire career. People who think that saying less makes them seem smarter, who use silence as a manipulation tactic, who hide behind this facade of calm professionalism because they know if they actually engaged, if they actually argued their points directly, they'd lose. Still nothing from Jasmine. She closes one folder and opens another, her movements precise and unhurried. The audience is starting to feel it too. The weight of her silence, the way it's forcing Trump to work harder to explain more, to justify positions he probably would have left alone if she'd been fighting back. People are leaning forward watching her as much as they're watching him trying to understand what she's doing. Trump walks back to his chair but doesn't sit. He's too agitated. This is exactly the problem with the so-called intellectual class. They think silence is strategy. They think withholding reaction is the same as winning an argument, but it's not. It's just cowardice dressed up as sophistication. He points at her directly. Say something. Defend your position. Stop sitting there like you're judging me from some moral high ground when you haven't actually countered a single thing I've said. You've shown some timelines, you've played some video clips, but you haven't actually proven anything except that you're good at collecting old footage and arranging it to make me look inconsistent. Jasmine finally looks up from her notes, but she doesn't speak. She just looks at him, her expression unchanged, and then returns her attention to the document in front of her. The effect on Trump is visible. His face flushes darker. His gestures become more emphatic. He's losing his composure bit by bit, and everyone can see it. Fine, he says, his voice rising. Sit there in silence. Play your games. But America sees what you're doing. They see that you don't have real arguments, just theatrics. They see that when challenged directly, you retreat into this act because you can't actually defend the absurd position that book learning matters more than real-world achievement. He sits down heavily, crossing his arms. I'm done playing your game. I've said what needs to be said. If you want to respond with actual substance instead of silent judgment, go ahead. But I'm not going to keep performing for your benefit while you sit there acting superior. The silence that follows is crushing. Jasmine still doesn't speak. She simply reaches for another folder, the third one she's brought still unopened, and places it on the table in front of her. The cameras catch the label on its edge. Public Statements 2015 to 2024, Education and Expertise. Trump sees it too, and for the first time a flicker of uncertainty crosses his face. Jasmine finally speaks, her voice quiet but clear. I'd like to show the audience something else. No commentary from me. Just a series of clips compiled from public interviews, speeches, and press conferences over the past decade. She nods to the production team. The monitors flicker to life again. The first clip plays. Trump at a rally, voice booming. These professors and experts, they don't know anything about the real world. They sit in their universities collecting paychecks from taxpayers while contributing nothing. Education has become a scam, and it's time we stop pretending these people have anything valuable to say. The crowd in the clip cheers. Trump on screen looks triumphant. The clip cuts immediately to another. Trump in a television interview, calmer, more measured. I have tremendous respect for education. I went to Wharton, one of the best business schools in the world. I surround myself with the smartest, most educated people because that's how you succeed. You need experts. You need people who've studied these issues deeply. The contrast is jarring. The audience in the studio shifts uncomfortably. Another clip. Trump at a different rally. They want to tell you that you need their permission to have an opinion, that you need a degree from their approved universities to understand what's good for the country. It's garbage. Common sense beats book learning every single time. Cut to Trump at a formal dinner, speaking to donors. Education is the foundation of American excellence. We need to invest in our universities, support our researchers, and ensure that the brightest minds have the resources to solve our biggest challenges. The compilation continues. Trump mocking climate scientists in one clip, then praising scientific research in another. Trump dismissing economic experts in one speech, then citing their credentials to support his policies in another. Trump ridiculing legal scholars, then invoking their analyses when it benefited him. Each contradiction is presented without comment. No voiceover explaining the hypocrisy. No text on screen highlighting the inconsistencies. Just Trump's own words, his own face, his own voice saying one thing to one audience and the opposite to another. The final clip plays. It's recent from just months ago. Trump at a small-town event speaking to a crowd of supporters. These intellectuals, these so-called experts with their fancy degrees, they look down on you. They think you're too stupid to understand complicated issues. They think education makes them better than you. But it doesn't. It just makes them out of touch with real America. The screen goes dark. The studio is absolutely silent. Not the silence of earlier when people were processing or waiting for the next development. This is the silence of recognition, of seeing something you can't unsee, of having a pattern made so obvious that denial becomes impossible. Jasmine still doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. The videos have spoken for themselves. Trump's face has gone from flush to pale. His mouth opens as if to speak, then closes. He looks like a man watching his own words being used as weapons against him, knowing that anything he says now will just add to the compilation. The silence stretches. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Nobody moves. The cameras don't cut away. They hold on Trump's face, on Jasmine's calm expression, on the dark monitors that just finished playing the compilation. Finally, Trump finds his voice. But it's different now, defensive, uncertain, lacking the aggressive confidence of earlier. Those clips, they're taken from different contexts. Different situations require different messages. When you're speaking to a rally, you speak one way. When you're in a formal setting, you speak another way. That's not inconsistency. That's called understanding your audience. He's talking faster now, words tumbling over each other. And besides, most of those clips are years old. People evolve. Positions change. I've learned things over time that have changed my perspective on certain issues. That's called growth, not hypocrisy. Jasmine finally responds, and her voice is so quiet that the entire room has to strain to hear it. Mr. Trump, which version should America believe? The version where education is essential and experts should be respected, or the version where education is a scam and experts are out-of-touch elitists? Trump tries to interrupt, but she continues, her voice still soft but unwavering. Because you can't have it both ways. You can't praise education when it serves your interests and mock it when it threatens your authority. You can't surround yourself with credentialed experts while telling America that credentials don't matter. You can't build your own legitimacy on the foundation of elite education, Wharton, as you mentioned, while dismissing other people's education as worthless. She pauses, and the pause is devastating. Unless, of course, the truth is simpler than all your explanations. Unless the truth is that you don't actually believe any consistent position on education or expertise. Unless the truth is that you say whatever the moment requires, whatever the audience wants to hear, whatever serves your immediate political purpose, without any regard for coherence or honesty. Trump stands up abruptly. This is ridiculous. This is a character assassination disguised as a hearing. You're taking years of public statements, stripping away all nuance and context, and presenting them as if they prove some grand hypocrisy, when really all they prove is that you've spent an unhealthy amount of time obsessing over every word I've ever said in public. But his voice is shaking slightly. The bravado is cracking. A woman in the audience, older, wearing a cardigan, someone's grandmother, raises her hand tentatively. The moderator nods to her. Mr. Trump, she says, her voice quavering but determined. I'm a retired teacher. I spent 40 years in public schools, and I'm sitting here listening to you say that education doesn't matter, that people like me who dedicated our lives to learning and teaching are just out-of-touch elitists. But then I see those videos where you say the opposite. So I need to know, do you respect what I did with my life? Or do you think I wasted it on something worthless? Trump stares at her, opens his mouth, closes it again. The silence returns heavier than before. Because this isn't about politics anymore. This isn't about partisan arguments or policy debates. This is personal. This is about whether a leader respects the people who've built their lives around the pursuit and transmission of knowledge. And Trump has no answer that won't alienate either the woman in front of him or the base that cheers when he mocks education. He sits back down slowly. His hands grip the armrests. His jaw works as if he's trying to form words that won't come. Jasmine breaks the silence one more time, her voice still soft but cutting through like a blade. Being loud doesn't make you right, Mr. Trump, and having no consistent position doesn't make you flexible, it just makes you unreliable. The cameras hold on his face. The rhythm he's controlled for years, the ability to talk his way out of anything, to deflect and redirect and dominate, it's broken. And Jasmine reaches for the second thick folder she's kept beside her throughout the hearing. This one is different from the others, older, more worn with tabs marking multiple sections. She places it on the table with deliberate care. I want to shift our focus now, she says, her voice taking on a different quality, less prosecutorial, more somber. Because this isn't just about your inconsistencies or your political positioning. This is about the real-world consequences of treating knowledge and expertise with contempt. She opens the folder. Inside are photographs, not glossy publicity shots, but grainy newspaper clippings and printed images from news websites. She selects one and holds it up to the camera. This is a photograph from Flint, Michigan, a city where government officials ignored warnings from water quality experts, dismissed concerns from public health professionals, and insisted that everything was fine despite clear evidence of lead contamination. The people making those decisions didn't respect the expertise telling them they were wrong. They didn't value the knowledge that could have prevented a public health crisis. She sets that photo down and picks up another. This is from a community in West Virginia where mining regulations were relaxed over the objections of environmental scientists and safety experts. The officials who made that decision dismissed the concerns as overstated, called the experts alarmists, suggesting that practical business sense should override academic caution. And then the dam failed, and people died. Her voice remains steady, factual, but there's an undercurrent of emotion now. This is from a school district that cut funding for special education programs because the administrators didn't believe the research showing their necessity. They said common sense and parental instinct were more important than what trained educators and child development specialists recommended. And children suffered, measurably, documentably. Children who could have thrived with proper support fell through the cracks because the people in power didn't respect expertise. She spread several more photographs across the table. Infrastructure failures, public health crises, environmental disasters, educational collapses. All of them share a common thread: leaders who dismissed expert knowledge, who treated credentials and education with contempt, who believed their instincts and political calculations were more valuable than informed analysis. Trump tries to interrupt. You can't blame me for I'm not blaming you for these specific incidents, Jasmine says firmly. I'm showing you what happens when the contempt for knowledge that you've normalized becomes policy. When leaders across the country hear the message that expertise doesn't matter, that education is for elitists, that common sense beats specialized training, this is what follows. Not immediately, not directly, but inevitably. She picks up a document from the folder. This is a study tracking public trust in expertise over the past decade. The correlation between political rhetoric, dismissing education, and declining public confidence in scientists, doctors, engineers, teachers, it's not subtle. When leaders mock knowledge, their followers learn to distrust the people who have it. The photographs remain spread across the table, visible to the cameras, impossible to ignore. Trump stands again, and this time his voice is sharp with anger and desperation. This is outrageous. This is completely outrageous. You're sitting here trying to blame me for infrastructure failures and public health crises that happened because of failed democratic policies, corrupt local officials, and systemic problems that existed long before I ever ran for office. His voice rises, filling the studio. And now you're using photographs of suffering people I had nothing to do with harming, as emotional manipulation to make it seem like my criticism of overregulation and academic elitism is somehow responsible for every bad thing that's happened in America. That's not journalism. That's not investigation. That's propaganda. He points at the photographs with contempt. Those pictures don't prove anything except that you're willing to exploit tragedy to score political points. You're using real people's pain as props in your little crusade against me because you can't actually win this argument on substance, so you resort to emotional manipulation and guilt by association. The moderator tries to intervene. Mr. Trump, if you could please, but Trump talks over him, his focus entirely on Jasmine now. And you sitting there with your law degree and your folders and your carefully arranged evidence, you think this makes you morally superior. You think showing pictures of problems and claiming that respecting you would have prevented them gives you some kind of high ground. His voice drips with scorn. You're not defending knowledge. You're defending your own class. You're defending a system where people like you, credentialed, connected, approved by the right institutions, get to tell everyone else what to think and how to live. And when people like me point out that your track record isn't actually that great, that your policies have created as many problems as they've solved, you fall back on this emotional blackmail. He gestures wildly at the photographs. Those are tragedies, real tragedies. But they're not my fault, and they're not the fault of Americans who are tired of being lectured by people who've never lived in the real world. They're the fault of bad governance, corruption, incompetence, things that exist across the political spectrum and have nothing to do with whether someone respects your educational credentials. The attack is vicious, personal, designed to put Jasmine on the defensive and shift attention away from the evidence in front of her. The moderator finally manages to be heard. Mr. Trump, you need to return to your seat. Miss Jasmine, please respond to the substance of his concerns rather than, Jasmine doesn't defend herself, doesn't address the personal attacks, doesn't explain her methodology or justify her evidence. She simply picks up a single sheet of paper from the folder. Her hand is steady. Her voice is quiet. I'm going to read something. It's short. It's from a letter written by a water quality engineer in Flint, Michigan, before the crisis became national news. Before children were hospitalized, before the damage was irreversible. She begins to read, her voice clear and measured. I am writing to formally document my concerns about the current water treatment protocols. Based on my analysis and the analysis of multiple independent laboratories, the water contains dangerous levels of lead. I understand that addressing this will be expensive and politically difficult. I understand that my warnings may be seen as alarmist or overstated, but I am an expert in water quality. I have spent my career studying these issues, and I am telling you with absolute certainty that if this is not corrected immediately, people will be harmed. Children will be harmed. The damage will be permanent. Please, I am begging you to take this seriously before it's too late. Jasmine looks up from the paper. This letter was ignored. The engineer who wrote it was dismissed as overly cautious, too concerned with worst-case scenarios, not understanding the practical constraints of local government. Within 6 months, the crisis he predicted was in full effect. She picks up another sheet. This is from a structural engineer who raised concerns about a bridge in Pennsylvania. His analysis showed critical weaknesses that needed immediate attention. He was told he was being too conservative, that his standards were unrealistic, that practical budget considerations had to take priority over theoretical safety margins. The bridge collapsed 8 months after his report was filed. Her voice doesn't waver, doesn't dramatize. She's just reading facts, but the facts are devastating. This is from an epidemiologist who warned about pandemic preparation protocols. This is from a climate scientist who predicted specific flooding patterns. This is from an education specialist who identified early warning signs of a literacy crisis. All of them were experts. All of them were right. All of them were ignored by leaders who didn't respect their knowledge. She sets the papers down gently. This is what happens when contempt for expertise becomes normal. When leaders model the behavior that credentials don't matter, that education is suspicious, that experts are just elitists with agendas. The consequences aren't abstract. They're not theoretical. They're measured in lead levels in children's blood, in collapsed infrastructure, in preventable deaths. The studio is completely silent, not a cough, not a rustle, just absolute suffocating quiet. Jasmine's final words are barely above a whisper, but they carry through the studio like a bell. These experts weren't asking for power. They weren't demanding authority. They were just trying to use the knowledge they'd spent their lives acquiring to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. And they were dismissed, and people suffered. She looks at Trump. That's what your contempt for knowledge cost, Mr. Trump. Not your reputation, not your political brand. Lives. It costs lives. The silence that follows is the heaviest of the entire hearing. Trump is staring at the table. The audience is staring at the photographs still spread across Jasmine's desk. The cameras are holding on her face, not triumphant, not angry, just infinitely sad. Nobody knows what to say, because there's nothing to say. The evidence has spoken, and its voice is overwhelming. Jasmine reaches for the last folder, the one she's kept untouched until now. It's thin, containing only a few sheets, but the way she handles it suggests its contents carry more weight than everything that's come before. "There's one more thing I need to show," she says quietly. "It's going to seem simple compared to everything we've already discussed, but sometimes the simplest evidence is the most damning." She opens the folder and pulls out two documents. She places them side by side on the table, where the cameras can capture them clearly. On the left is a public policy document from your administration. It's about education reform, specifically about reducing federal funding for advanced degree programs in science and engineering. The justification given here, she points to a highlighted section, is that these programs produce graduates who are disconnected from practical American needs, and that the funding would be better spent on vocational training and apprenticeship programs. She taps the document. The language throughout this policy brief is dismissive of advanced education. It characterizes graduate research as ivory tower intellectualism and suggests that America's investment in higher education has been wasteful and elitist. The tone and arguments are consistent with everything you've said publicly about education being overvalued. Trump starts to speak, but Jasmine raises her hand. "Please wait. I want to show you what's on the right." She points to the second document. This is from the same period, actually from the same month. It's a letter written on official letterhead signed by you personally to the parents of a student who had written asking for your advice about pursuing higher education. She begins to read from the letter, her voice clear and measured. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, thank you for your letter regarding your daughter Sarah's educational future. I'm delighted to hear she's been accepted to multiple graduate programs in engineering. Higher education, particularly in technical fields, is one of America's greatest strengths. We need brilliant young people like Sarah pursuing advanced degrees, conducting research, and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. Please encourage her to choose the most rigorous program available and to pursue her doctorate. The investment in education always pays dividends, both for the individual and for our nation. America's future depends on having the most educated, most capable experts in every field. With admiration for Sarah's achievements and best wishes for her continued success." Jasmine sets the letter down. The monitors around the studio display both documents side by side, the policy brief dismissing advanced education on the left, the personal letter praising it on the right. Same month, same signature. Completely contradictory messages. The audience is staring at the screens. You can see people leaning forward, squinting to read the documents themselves, trying to reconcile what they're seeing. Jasmine's voice is soft but cuts through the silence like a scalpel. "So which is true, Mr. Trump? Is advanced education a waste of taxpayer money that produces disconnected elitists? Or is it America's greatest strength that we should encourage brilliant young people to pursue? Is graduate research ivory tower intellectualism? Or is it pushing the boundaries of human knowledge that America's future depends on?" She looks directly at him. "You can't claim both. You can't publicly defund and dismiss the same education you privately praise and encourage. Unless, of course, the truth is that you have no actual position on this at all. Unless the truth is that you say whatever serves your political interest in the moment, with no concern for consistency, honesty, or the damage your contradictions cause." The documents remain on display. The evidence is irrefutable. Trump's own words, his own signature, his own contradiction laid bare for everyone to see. Trump stares at the two documents. His face cycles through expressions: confusion, recognition, anger, desperation. His mouth opens and closes several times without sound emerging. When he finally speaks, it's not a coherent argument. It's just emotion, raw and unfiltered. "This is you can't, that letter was..." He starts again. "That was a personal correspondence. That was me being nice to a family who wrote to me. You're taking a private letter where I was trying to be encouraging and using it as some kind of gotcha moment. That's disgusting. That's a violation of..." It's not private. Jasmine interrupts gently. The Patterson family released it publicly 3 years ago when they became advocates for education funding. It's been in the public domain ever since. You wrote it knowing it could be shared. And you wrote it while simultaneously drafting policy that contradicted every single sentiment in it. Trump's voice rises, but there's a tremor in it now. You're twisting everything, you're taking words out of context and arranging them to make me look like a hypocrite when really all I'm doing is what every leader does, balancing different priorities, speaking to different audiences, addressing complex issues that don't have simple black and white answers. His hands are shaking slightly. He grips the edge of the table to steady them. You think you're so smart with your law degree and your carefully assembled evidence? You think this proves something. All it proves is that you've wasted months of your life combing through every word I've ever said or written looking for contradictions, because you can't beat me on substance, so you have to resort to this kind of nitpicking, gotcha journalism. Jasmine doesn't respond. She just lets him talk, lets him expend his energy against the immovable wall of his own documented words. Trump continues, his voice getting louder but less coherent. I have done more for this country than you could ever understand. I have created jobs, built businesses, negotiated deals, made America stronger in ways that your books and your studies and your expert opinions never could. And you sit there with your smug face and your folders full of papers, thinking you've accomplished something here today? He's standing now, pacing behind his chair. You haven't accomplished anything. You haven't proven anything. All you've done is demonstrate that when you have enough time and enough obsession and enough hatred for someone, you can make anything look suspicious. You can turn success into failure, consistency into hypocrisy, strength into weakness. But his voice cracks on the last word, and everyone hears it. The cameras catch it. The moment when the performance breaks and what's underneath shows through not confidence, not certainty, but desperation. You don't understand anything, he says, and his voice is quieter now, almost pleading. You don't understand what it's like to make decisions that affect millions of people. You don't understand the pressure, the complexity, the impossible balance of trying to please everyone while staying true to your principles. You sit in judgment with your perfect little evidence folders, but you've never had to lead. You've never had to govern. You've never had to make the hard choices. Jasmine remains silent, waiting, watching him unravel. When Trump finally sits down exhausted by his own outburst, Jasmine speaks. Her voice is so quiet that the entire studio has to strain to hear it, but every word lands with devastating precision. Mr. Trump, you're right about one thing. I have never had to lead at the level you have. I have never made decisions that affected millions of lives. I have never governed a nation or commanded the kind of power you've wielded. She pauses, and the pause is calculated, weighted. But that's exactly why expertise matters. That's exactly why knowledge is essential. That's exactly why leaders need to respect education and listen to experts rather than dismissing them as elitists. Her voice remains soft, but there's steel underneath. Because when the decisions are that important, when the consequences are that severe, when millions of lives hang in the balance, that's when you most need people who have spent their lives studying these issues. That's when you most need experts who can tell you what you don't know. That's when you most need the humility to admit that instinct and confidence aren't enough. She picks up the two documents again. But instead, you mock education publicly while praising it privately. You defund expert programs while telling individual families to pursue them. You dismiss knowledge as elitism while depending on it for every major decision you make. Her eyes don't leave his face. And the result is that millions of Americans no longer know what to believe. They hear you praise education one day and mock it the next. They see you rely on experts while calling expertise worthless. They watch you contradict yourself so consistently that contradiction becomes normal, becomes expected, becomes something people just accept as part of how leadership works. She sets the documents down one final time. That's the real damage, Mr. Trump. Not that you've been inconsistent, politicians often are. Not that you've said things you don't believe, that's hardly unique. The real damage is that you've normalized the contempt for knowledge itself. You've made it acceptable for leaders to dismiss expertise, to mock education, to treat informed analysis as suspicious rather than valuable. Her voice drops even quieter. And when contempt for knowledge becomes normal, when expertise becomes something to attack rather than respect, when education becomes a liability instead of an asset, that's when societies start to fail. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, inevitably, as the foundation of informed decision-making crumbles and is replaced with nothing but confidence, charisma, and the ability to shout loudest. She looks directly into the camera, speaking to America rather than to Trump. Being loud doesn't make you right. Having power doesn't make you wise. And mocking the people who know more than you doesn't make you strong. It just makes you dangerous. The silence that follows is absolute. Trump is slumped in his chair staring at nothing. The audience is frozen. The cameras hold on Jasmine's face, not triumphant, not angry, just infinitely tired and infinitely sad. She's not celebrating victory. She's mourning what's been lost. Trump doesn't move. For the first time in the entire hearing, he's completely still. Not fidgeting, not preparing his next attack, not playing to the cameras. Just sitting there staring at the table in front of him, his hands resting limply on the armrests. The cameras capture his face in a way they haven't before, not the performance, not the character he plays, but something more human underneath. Exhaustion, uncertainty, the weight of having his own words used against him so thoroughly that there's nothing left to say. A full minute passes. Nobody speaks. The moderator doesn't intervene. The audience doesn't move. Everyone is just watching Trump sit there in silence, and that silence is more powerful than any response could have been. Finally, he looks up. His eyes find Jasmine's across the table, and for just a moment the cameras catch something that might be recognition, not agreement, not capitulation, but acknowledgement that something has shifted, that the narrative he's controlled for so long has slipped beyond his ability to reclaim it. He opens his mouth as if to speak, then closes it again. Whatever he was going to say, whatever deflection or justification or attack he was preparing, he can't find the words. Or maybe he realizes that words won't work anymore, that the evidence is too clear, the contradictions too stark, the damage too visible. His hands grip the armrests again, but there's no energy in the gesture. He looks tired, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, the kind of tired that comes from maintaining a performance for so long that you've forgotten what lies underneath it. The moderator finally speaks, his voice gentle, almost sympathetic. "Mr. Trump, would you like to make a final statement?" Trump looks at him as if the question doesn't make sense, as if the concept of a final statement, of wrapping this up neatly, of ending on his terms, is so foreign that he can't process it. He starts, then stops. No final statement." The words are barely audible. The cameras have to zoom in to catch them. And the fact that they're spoken at all, that Trump, who has never in his public life declined an opportunity to have the last word, is choosing silence, that fact speaks volumes. The moderator looks at Jasmine. "Ms. Jasmine, do you have anything to add?" She shakes her head slowly. "No, the evidence speaks for itself." Nobody applauds. Nobody cheers. Nobody makes any sound of triumph or celebration, because what they've just witnessed isn't a victory, it's an autopsy. A careful, methodical examination of how contempt for knowledge became normalized, how contradiction became acceptable, how a leader's relationship with truth became so fractured that consistency itself seems quaint. The audience sits in their seats, not moving, not speaking. Some are crying quietly. Others are staring at nothing, processing. A few are holding hands with the people next to them, as if physical contact can anchor them through the weight of what they have seen. A man in the back row, older, wearing a veteran's cap, is shaking his head slowly, rhythmically. Not in disagreement, in something that looks more like grief. A woman in the front has her hand over her mouth, her eyes red. She's not crying from anger or joy. She's crying from the sheer emotional exhaustion of watching something she believed in reveal itself to be hollow. The cameras pan slowly across the audience, capturing face after face. And what's remarkable is the absence of celebration. Nobody is pumping their fist. Nobody is smiling. Nobody is acting like they've just watched their side win. Because this isn't about sides anymore. This is about recognition, about seeing clearly, perhaps for the first time, the cost of normalizing contempt for expertise, about understanding what happens when leaders model the behavior, that knowledge doesn't matter, that consistency is optional, that truth is whatever serves the moment. One by one, people start to stand. Not to leave the hearing isn't officially over, but because sitting has become unbearable. They stand and they look at each other, and in those looks is something like shared acknowledgement. We saw this. We can't unsee it. We have to decide what to do with what we know now. A young woman near the middle pulls out her phone, not to take a selfie or post a quick reaction. She opens her notes app and starts writing as if she needs to record this moment before it fades, before the clarity of this moment gets muddied by interpretation and spin and the passage of time. Jasmine begins gathering her folders. The movement is slow, methodical, giving people time to process, to absorb, to begin the long work of reconciling what they believed with what they now know. As she stacks the documents, she speaks one last time. Not to Trump, not to the moderator, to the cameras, to America, to history. I want to be very clear about what happened here today. This wasn't about winning an argument. This wasn't about destroying a political opponent. This wasn't even about proving hypocrisy, though we've certainly documented plenty of it. She picks up the final folder, the one with the two contradictory documents, and holds it up. This was about answering a question that matters more than any individual politician or any single administration. The question is this: what happens when a society stops valuing knowledge? What happens when expertise becomes suspicious? What happens when education is treated as elitism rather than empowerment? Her voice is steady, but there's emotion underneath, controlled but present. And the answer, as we've seen today, is that truth becomes negotiable. Consistency becomes optional. Facts become whatever the most powerful voice says they are. And the people who suffer most are the ones who can't afford their own experts, who can't verify information independently, who have to trust that their leaders are telling them the truth. She sets the folder down. Every person watching this has to make a choice now, not about whether to support or oppose any particular politician, but about whether to demand better, about whether to insist that leaders respect knowledge rather than mock it, about whether to accept that expertise matters and education serves a purpose beyond credentialing elites. She looks directly into the main camera. Because if we accept that being loud is the same as being right, if we accept that confidence can replace competence, if we accept that leaders don't need to be consistent or honest or respectful of the knowledge that protects us, then we've given up on the very idea that truth exists independently of power. The hook returns one final time, delivered with quiet devastation. Being loud doesn't make you right. Being powerful doesn't make you honest. And being willing to say anything doesn't make you a leader, it just makes you dangerous. She picks up her briefcase. This hearing is over, but the question remains, and every person in America has to answer it for themselves. Do we want leaders who respect knowledge, or do we want leaders who mock it? Do we want expertise to inform our decisions, or do we want confidence to replace it? Do we want truth to matter, or do we want power to define it? She walks toward the exit. The cameras follow her, and as she reaches the door, she turns back one last time. The choice is yours, but whatever you choose, you can't say you didn't know. Not anymore. Today you saw the cost of normalizing contempt for knowledge, and you can't unsee it. She walks out. The door closes behind her. Trump is still sitting at the table, silent, diminished, unable or unwilling to reclaim the narrative that slipped away from him. And in the studio and homes across America, the recognition settles in like snow, quiet, relentless, impossible to ignore. The hearing is over, but nothing will be the same. The moderator stands, his voice formal but strained. This hearing is now concluded. No verdict will be issued. No judgment will be rendered. The evidence presented today becomes part of the public record. He pauses, looking around the studio. What happens next is up to the American people, how they choose to weigh this evidence, what standards they choose to hold their leaders to. Trump finally stands and walks out, flanked by his team. His departure is notable for its silence. No defiance, no bravado. He just leaves. Jasmine is already gone. The evidence remains on the tables, documents, photographs, timelines, all of it available, all of it undeniable. Outside the building, reporters surround both exits, but neither Trump nor Jasmine stops. There's nothing left to say. In living rooms across America, families sit in silence. What they witnessed wasn't a political debate, it was a mirror held up to a nation. A father turns to his daughter, a college student. "I'm sorry we made you doubt whether your education mattered." She takes his hand. Across the country, teachers receive messages from former students. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for believing education matters." Something shifts. Not dramatically, but in quiet conversations and questions, people start asking, in standards they begin to demand. The change is slow, fragile, but it's there. A town hall in Ohio. A candidate dismisses experts. An audience member asks, "How do you make decisions about issues you don't understand? If you rely on experts, why dismiss them now?" A school board in Arizona. A parent stands, "My child deserves teachers who spent years learning how to teach." That's not elitism. That's competence. The hearing produced no winners, only recognition. Only the choice facing everyone accept this as normal or demand change. Faith doesn't return overnight, but it can begin with acknowledgement what we've accepted isn't acceptable. Being loud doesn't make you right, and words should mean something or they mean nothing at all. What this hearing teaches us is simple, and enduring knowledge doesn't need to shout to matter, it needs to hold. In real life, credibility is built when words, records, and actions align, especially under pressure. Mockery may win a moment, but preparation wins the long run in leadership, in work, and in personal integrity. What's your take on this hearing? Where are you watching from and what time is it right now? I read every comment, and the most thoughtful ones help shape future videos. This video is created for educational and inspirational purposes, under fair use, not to defame or attack any individual. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. It means the world. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share so more voices can join this journey. Until next time, stay strong, stay awake, and I'll see you in the next video.